the larder till required, she said, returning to her theme. Mrs. Mullet could be uncommonly informative when allowed to lecture uninterrupted, and I pulled up a chair to listen. Like laying the keel of a battleship, she went on. You mustn't leave it till the enemy's in sight. Who's the enemy? I asked. The groom? Mrs. Mullet laid a forefinger alongside her nose in the ancient sign of secrecy. That's for every woman to find out for herself, she said, tapping the finger and causing her nose to give off an alarming hollow knocking sound. She lowered her voice. Until she does, she needs all the spells she can get to keep away the old ones. The old ones? This was becoming truly interesting. First poisons, and now malevolent supernatural spirits. It wasn't yet 10 o'clock in the morning. Mrs. Mullet was now scraping the batter out of the bowl and into a large cake pan. Here, let me help you, I said, reaching for the oven door. Not yet, Mrs. Mullet said, surprisingly short-tempered. First things first, grab an handful of them sticks and toss 'em on top of the fire. In the basket there, she added, pointing with the spoon, as if I hadn't seen them. A wicker basket beside the cooker was half filled with a tangle of twigs and branches. Run a bit of water in the sink, she said. We want some good and damp. I did as I was told. To make steam? I asked, wondering how the steam was going to find its way from the firebox to the oven chamber. Something like that, Mrs. Mullet said, as I opened the firebox and threw the wet wood on top of the fire. And something else besides. Again, the finger beside the nose. Protection, I guessed. Against the enemy? That's right, dear, Mrs. Mullet said. Hazel and hawthorn. I gathered them with me own hands in gibbet wood. Now, one more thing, and we're ready to pop in the cake. She pulled a sprig of needled leaves from the pocket of her apron. Rosemary, I exclaimed. I recognised it from the kitchen garden. That's right, dear, Mrs. Mullet said again, as the warm, spicy odour of the herb filled the kitchen. To remind Miss Ophelia of her home, and all them as have ever loved her. Rosemary in the oven for the cake, and rosemary in her bouquet. It also helps keep off the hobgoblins. I thought rosemary was for funerals, I said. I remembered that because Daffy was always quoting Shakespeare. And so it is, dear. Funerals and weddings both. That's why it's such an handy herb to have round the house, which is why we grows it in the kitchen garden. If we wants it for weddings, we soaks it in scented water and braids it into the bride's veil and bouquet. For funerals, we wets it with rainwater and tosses it into the open grave on top of the coffin. We also tucks a bit of it into the shroud, she added. If we have one, of course, which most of us doesn't nowadays, what with it being charged as an extra expense by the undertakers. And the hazel sticks? I asked. Guarantees descendants, she said, her face suddenly serious. Poor Feely, I thought, alone upstairs at this very moment, innocently picking her pimples in a sterling silver hand mirror, without the faintest idea that the cook was in the kitchen, already fiddling with her future. It almost made me feel sorry for my sister. Now don't ask me no more pesky questions, Mrs. Mullet said. I've got 4 more layers to bake and dinner to get started for you lot. What about the hawthorn? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. It is believed by some, but not by me, that the haws, or berries, and the flowers of the hawthorn preserve in their smell the stench of the Great Plague of London, whereas I, with my scientific mind, know perfectly well that both haws and flowers of the tree contain a substantial quantity of trimethylamine, which is the chemical compound responsible for the smell of putrefaction. Never you mind, Mrs. Mullet said. Ask me no questions and I shall tell you no lies. It was her standard response to any question whose expected answer had to do with the birds and the bees. Thanks, Mrs. M, I said cheerfully. It's just as I suspected. And I skipped out of the kitchen before she could fling a piece of pastry at me. Anyway, as I was saying, the wedding was, well, interesting. Although it was autumn...